that antique land that was soon to blossom into luxuriant flower. Emerson's keen intelligence and acerbic tongue, which had won him the title Father of Curses from his devoted Egyptian workmen, made him a foeman worthy of my steel. And yet, dear reader, these were not my real reasons for yielding to Emerson's suit. I deplore clichés, but in this case I must resort to one. Emerson swept me off my feet. I am determined to be completely candid as I pen these pages, for I have made certain they will not be published, at least during my lifetime. They began as a personal journal, perused only by a critic whose intimate relationship gave him access to my private thoughts. So he claimed, at any rate. As his remarks on the style and content of my writing became more critical, I decided to disallow the claim and lock up my journals. They are therefore mine alone, and unless my heirs decide that the scholarly world should not be deprived of the insights contained therein, which may well occur, no eyes but mine will read these words. Why, then, the gentle reader will ask, do I infer his or her existence by addressing her or him? The answer should be obvious. Art cannot exist in a vacuum. The creative spirit must possess an audience. It is impossible for a writer to do herself justice if she is only talking to herself. Having established this important point, I return to my narrative. Not only did Emerson sweep me off my feet, I swept him off his. I speak figuratively, of course. By current standards, I am not beautiful. Fortunately for me, Emerson's tastes in this area, as in most others, are highly original. My complexion, which others find sallow and dark, he described, on one memorable occasion, as resembling the honey of Hymettus. My coarse jet-black hair, which refuses to remain confined in braids, buns, or nets, arouses in him a peculiar variety of tactile enjoyment. And his remarks about my figure, which is unfashionably slender in some areas and overly endowed in others, cannot be reproduced, even here. By any standards, Emerson is a remarkably fine-looking man. He stands over 6 feet tall, and his stalwart frame possesses the elasticity and muscular development of youth, thanks to a vigorous outdoor life. Under the rays of the benevolent Egyptian sun, his brawny arms and rugged face turn golden brown, forming a striking setting for the sapphire brilliance of his eyes. The removal of his beard, at my urgent request, uncovered a particularly attractive dimple in his chin. Emerson prefers to call it a cleft when he refers to the feature at all, but it is a dimple. His hair is sable, thick and soft, shining with Titian gleams in the sunlight. But enough of that. Suffice it to say that the wedded state proved highly agreeable, and the first years of our marriage were fully as pleasant as I had expected. We spent the winter in Egypt, excavating by day and sharing the delightful privacy of an otherwise unoccupied tomb by night, and the summer in England with Emerson's brother Walter, a distinguished philologist and the husband of my dear friend Evelyn. It was a thoroughly satisfactory existence. I cannot imagine why I, who am normally as far-sighted and practical as a woman can be, did not realize that the matrimonial state quite often leads to another related state. I refer, of course, to motherhood. When the possibility of this interesting condition first manifested itself, I was not excessively put out. According to my calculations, the child would be born in the summer, enabling me to finish the season's work and get the business over and done with before returning to the dig in the autumn. This proved to be the case, and we left the infant, a boy named after his uncle Walter, in the care of that gentleman and his wife when we set out for Egypt in October. What ensued was not entirely the child's fault. I had not anticipated that Emerson's next view of his son the following spring would induce a doting idiocy that manifested itself in baby talk, and in a reluctance to be parted from the creature. Ramses, as the child came to be called, merited his nickname. He was as imperious in his demands, and as pervasive in his presence, as that most arrogant of ancient Egyptian god-kings must have been. He was also alarmingly precocious. A lady of my acquaintance used that term to me after Ramses, aged 4, had treated her to a lecture on the proper method of excavating a compost heap. Hers, in point of fact. Her gardener was extremely abusive. When I replied that, in my opinion, the adjective was ill-chosen, she believed me to be offended. What I meant was that the word was inadequate. Catastrophically precocious would have been nearer the mark. Despite his devotion to the child, Emerson pined in the dreary climate of England. I refer not only to its meteorological climate, but to the sterile monotony of academic life to which my husband had been doomed by his decision to forego his Egyptian excavations. He would not go to Egypt without Ramses, and he would not risk the boy's health in that germ-infested part of the world. Only an appeal from a lady in distress, who turned out to be, as I suspected from the first, a thoroughgoing villainess, drew him from Ramses' side. And, seeing him glow and expand among his beloved antiquities, I determined that never again would I allow him to sacrifice himself for family commitments. We decided to take Ramses with us the following year, but a series of distressing events allowed me to postpone that pleasure. My dear friend and sister-in-law, Evelyn, who had produced 4 healthy children without apparent effort, suffered 2 successive disappointments, as she called them. The second miscarriage threw her into a state of deep depression. For some reason, possibly related to her confused mental condition, she found Ramses's company comforting and burst into tears when we proposed to take him away. Walter added his appeals, claiming that the boy's merry little tricks kept Evelyn from brooding. I could well believe that, because it required the concentrated attention of every adult in the household to restrain Ramses from self-immolation and a widespread destruction of property. We therefore yielded to the pleas of Ramses's aunt and uncle, I with gracious forbearance, Emerson with grudging reluctance. When we returned from Egypt the following spring, Ramses seemed nicely settled at Chalfont, and I saw no reason to alter the arrangement. I knew, however, that this excellent situation, excellent for Evelyn, I mean, of course, could not endure forever. But I decided not to worry about it. Sufficient unto the day, as the Scripture says. The day duly arrived. It was during the 3rd week in June. I was at work in the library trying to get Emerson's notes in order before he returned from London with the next installment. Some dark premonition undoubtedly brushed my mind, for though I am not easily distracted, particularly from a subject that enthralls me as much as 18th dynasty rock-cut tombs, I found myself sitting with idle hands, staring out at the garden. It was at its best that lovely summer afternoon. The roses were in bloom, and my perennial borders were looking their loveliest. None of the plants had been trampled or dug up. The blossoms had been culled with tender deliberation by the expert in that trade, not torn out, roots and all, to make bouquets for the servants and the dogs. The smooth green turf was unmarked by small booted feet or the holes of amateur excavation. Never before had I seen it in that pristine condition. Ramses had begun walking a month after we moved into the